There are 2.2 million people locked up in the United States alone. As of 2018, the United States rate of incarceration was 655 people per 100,000, which is nearly double the next leading nation. So, what's the story here? Is the United States just filled with so many more criminals than other countries? I'm afraid the answer is not so simple. The prison system in the United States is a money machine for a few large corporations. These corporations have a vested interest in keeping that machine running. Like many vendors that sell to the US government, they expend a significant amount of money lobbying the government and structuring deals to maximize their profits. Proponents of the system argue that organizations run much more efficiently than the government, and in fact save society money, but there's little data to actually prove this. The privatization of the criminal justice industry is just one piece of the puzzle. If you look at the way the government acted during this time period, you'll notice some things that are too interesting to ignore, particularly the effect that these policies had on minority communities. It's no secret that minorities, and particularly those of African descent, have had a rough go of it throughout the history of the United States. They had a big win in 1865 with the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. But it's important to look at what that amendment actually says. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. That qualifier, the part where it says, except as punishment for a crime, will be used repeatedly to do harm to not only Black Americans, but anyone caught up in the for-profit prison system. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Shortly after the 13th Amendment was ratified, 2 additional amendments were added to the benefit of Black Americans. The 14th Amendment gave Black people equal protection under the law, and the 15th Amendment granted Black men the right to vote. Now, this made some states, particularly southern states, upset because, well, racism. They didn't like that people they were once controlling now were equal under the eyes of the law. So they started to create some laws called Jim Crow laws that prevented Black Americans from attending the same school or using the same public restrooms, or from voting if they couldn't pass voter literacy tests. In the 1950s and 60s, there was a massive movement in the Black community for truly equal rights. They demanded these civil rights, and through years of effort, they got several really important laws passed, and there were some powerful Supreme Court decisions in their favor. But this too was too good to be true. Enter the war on drugs. Is it a coincidence that Nixon started the war on drugs in 1971, immediately following the civil rights movement? And furthermore, is it a coincidence that the war on drugs has disproportionately affected Black men? Surely it can't be a coincidence that in 2001, the number of imprisoned Black men was the same as the number of enslaved Black men in 1820? In response to the growing number of people being convicted for drug-related crimes, in 1984, the first private prison was opened in Tennessee by a company called Core Civic. In the 6 years that followed, 66 additional private prisons would be opened. You might be thinking, there's a difference between being imprisoned and being enslaved. And I would argue that no, there is not in our current system. I would argue that slavery is imprisonment for economic gain, plain and simple. Before 1865, the economic gain materialized based on the sale of the goods that the slaves produced. In the era of prison privatization, the economic gain comes from the imprisonment itself. Private prisons make their money through contracts with the government. If they estimate that they can house an inmate for $100 a day, but then turn around and sell a contract to the government for $150 per inmate per day, they can net $50 worth of profit per day. If they can further reduce the cost of housing an inmate, say by making them work the fields to produce the food that they need to eat, or by reducing staff, or by making the living conditions worse inside the prison, they can take home more of that $150. Private prisons are not incentivized to make the prison system better. In fact, they're incentivized to do the opposite. Private prisons are dangerous. They often cut crucial services such as cleaning. Healthcare is notoriously worse in private prisons than in state-run prisons. Sometimes they cut back on guard training that results in preventable injury and possibly death for both guards and inmates alike. They're also incentivized to keep the prisons full. One reason that private companies such as Geo Group and Core Civic are publicly traded companies is so that they can lobby the government, supporting candidates that are more likely to be tough on crime. If there's more crime, there's more money to be made. So, where do we go from here? It's worth mentioning that there are many detractors in our government currently, people who care deeply about abolishing the private prison system. Candidates like Bernie Sanders have been very loud in their support for abolishing this thing entirely. But I would encourage you to start smaller than that. There are many states that don't house any inmates in private prisons. Your state could be the next one if you make your opinion known and contact your state representatives. Change starts small sometimes, and with enough support, your state could be the next one to abolish private prisons. It's time we stopped putting people in prison for ridiculous charges, and it's time we stopped lining people's pocketbooks with blood. I'm Jake Donovan with Game the System, and please, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and give us a follow. Thanks.